Oh, what would you do in a case like this?
Well, I ring the bell.
All right.
One house? Oh, I thought that one was home. Okay, I was born in Jersey City, March 14th, 1919. I was born in my house, my mother and father's house. And Dr. McDeedy delivered me. And there was one boy and 7 girls. And I was the second youngest in the family. My oldest sister was Rose, then there was Betty, then Irene, then my brother Joe, then Viola, and Tessie, then me, and then my sister Caroline. Well, my father was a very talented man, and so was my mother. My father was a tailor, and he made men's suits, did a lot of stitching by hand. And my mother was a dressmaker, and they owned their own little business. They owned a store. And they also sold material, you know, if you wanted to buy the material and make something with it. And they did very well. I had a girlfriend. I guess we were about 3 years old, and she lived on the next street, but she would come and call me. And we also had a parrot in our, you know, was one of our pets. And he talked, and she would call. She'd say, "Gertrude, can you come out?" And the parrot learned to say that. And then he learned to say, "Gertrude, go to the bathroom." And I guess that was because my mother used to say it, maybe. I had to go to the bathroom frequently, yeah, I don't know. My father used to play this, we called it a sweet potato. He used to blow on it and press the holes, and then sound would come out. And the parrot would dance to the sound. And when my father passed away, the parrot passed away too, I guess from a broken heart. And I think my mother was in her late 40s, early 50s when he passed away. And I think my mother was 10 years younger than my father. Well, I graduated from high school in 1936, I know that much. Yeah, I wanted to drive. I was 17, and my brother took me. He taught me how to drive. He said I was very good. So then we went for the, you know, to get the final test. And, oh, it was a hot day, and the line was long, and we finally got up to the top. And I didn't have all the papers that were required. And my brother got mad at me, and he said he's not taking me back again. And I never pursued it. And I was stupid, you know, not to get my license. And my mother was interested in going to a country place because we We liked to swim so much. She wanted us to go where there was a lake we can swim in, and she liked the country too. So they saw an ad in the paper about Highland Lakes, and my sister Betty took my mother there, and she fell in love with the place and had a house built. I don't know how she had it built, where she got the money from, but she had the house built, and everyone seemed to enjoy it. She did very well for herself, you know? You have to give her credit. Eventually, after my mother passed away, my sister Viola and I took over the house. We bought it, and we were both married and had children at that time. And we spent the time together up there. We had a lot of fun. Then I met Dad after I graduated from high school, when I was out walking with a friend of mine. And I liked him. I used to see him and say hello to him, and he said hello to me. But this particular night, he walked up to me with his friend, and the two of them asked me out for a date that night. I was very popular. And the fellow that was with him was his cousin, actually. And I ended up going with Grandpa from then on. Yeah, we fell in love, and we had to accumulate a certain amount of money before Grandpa would marry me. And actually, he got all the money together because I didn't have money. What my mother gave me, we would have to give her our paycheck, and she would dole out so much a week for us, and that's what I had to live on. You know, my salary and I had to pay car fare to go to work, my clothes and everything. So I really didn't have too much money to save. But Grandpa, he was in a different situation. He was able to save money. So we had enough money to start a pretty good life together. After we got married, we had a 3-room apartment, and then Patty came along, and that was okay. We had enough room for her. But then the following year, I became pregnant with Trudy, and there was no room in the inn. So we lived where there was quite a few apartments. So I approached the superintendent and asked him if I could have a 4-room apartment. And he said there was one available. So we moved into the 4-room apartment. And then the war came, and Grandpa was taken into the war. He was drafted. And he was gone for about 2 years. And I was able to, manage. Actually, I was bitter because there was a law that anyone under, I think it was 25, and was married, I forget what the law was, but he was qualified not to go into war. He was working in the shipyard, and he had 2 babies, and but he was drafted. Then they passed the law saying that they had to go regardless of age or whatever job they had. And he didn't know how to swim. He could only do the door paddle, So he had to take a test, and they were in a pool, and every time, he would be able to go out to into the water for a short period of time. Then he had to swim into the edge of the pool, and they would push him out. It was a big sacrifice for him. But he did pass the test, and he got into the Navy, and that's where he was for 2 years. And he ended up in the invasion of Okinawa. He was in that. And then after that, the war was over, and eventually he came home. Then Michael and Joe were born. Joe, when it was time for him to be born, he came 1, 2, 3. He wasn't going to wait for anything. It was Mother's Day. He wanted to be born on Mother's Day. And it was 5:30 in the morning. I woke up and I said, "You have to get me to the hospital." I said, "I'm in labor." So we hopped in the car and shot right up. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning. So there was no traffic, fortunately. And when I got out of the car, I just collapsed, and I had to be taken into the hospital on a gurney. And then Joe was born. Did you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Drove fast.
Huh? Yeah.
Why couldn't
There's no traffic. There was no.
Slow road.
There was no traffic, so it was 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:30 in the morning. It was good. And then Eileen and Maureen were born last. And Maureen, we thought we were going to lose her because all of a sudden I was pregnant, and it was her due date, and I didn't feel any life. No movement, So my mother was at home with me, and she said I should go to the doctor. So I called Grandpa. He came home, took me to the doctors, and the doctor couldn't hear anything. And he suggested I go to the hospital. He said he thought the baby was dead. So I went to the hospital, and eventually the nurse heard the baby, and Maureen was born. But that morning was election. It was election day, and Grandpa and I went to vote. And when we went out to the car, on the car was a rosary beads, and he took the rosary beads off the antenna, and the cross, if you held it up to the light, there was a picture inside. And it was a picture of little children and a woman. And it was, Father Frank told us it was Our Lady of Knock from Ireland. This nun was supposed to have seen the Blessed Mother, and the children were around, Yeah. So we had a lot of faith in her because Maureen came home and she was fine. Nothing was wrong with her. So we felt it was a miracle, Well, he was a good doctor. I had him for a long time. And he never I don't know if I told him the story about no, he was Jewish, so I wouldn't tell him. He wouldn't believe it. Grandpa had taken a test to be a fireman. He passed, and he became a fireman, I think, because he admired his brother Jim, who was a fireman. As a matter of fact, he passed away. That was a very sad thing. 6 of us were on a trip. It was Uncle Jim and his wife Edna, Uncle George, Aunt Edna, Aunt Midge, Grandpa and I, and we went all the way down to Florida in a car. Uncle Jim had a big car, and while we were down there, he passed away. He had a heart attack. So that was very sad because we had to come home. We had to fly home. Well, there were a lot of sad things in the family. Before I became part of the family, I think Grandpa was just a little guy, and he had older brothers, older than Uncle Jim. And in a year's time, the 4 of them died. At that time, there was a terrible disease going around. The next year, the mother died. His mother died. Then he had a sister, Mary, and she died. So, Grandpa had to go through all this suffering, You remember him, don't you, Michael or Joe?
Yeah, Grandpa Finn.
Yeah.
Mustache.
A real Irishman. He was good. In 1947, it was the day after Christmas, and we had a terrible snowstorm. And Grandpa was a fireman, and the firehouse called him and said he was supposed to report for work because of the storm. You know, a lot of things, you had to have the fireman at the firehouse in case there's a fire. And then we also had a real Christmas tree that Christmas. And Grandpa called me later in the day and he said to me, get that tree out of the house because, you know, it was a fire hazard. And he was out. He was in the firehouse for a whole month. He was allowed to come home at night just for supper, and then he had to go back to the firehouse and stay. That's how dead bad it was at that time. And we had this scrawny artificial tree. I think it was about that wide. Do you remember that? And we're putting it up, and everybody's saying that they hated the tree and all that stuff. And all of a sudden the door opens up and in walks Grandpa with a real Christmas tree. Well, you never saw a tree get dismantled so fast as that day. Well, I guess because the kids were so unhappy, he buckled. Dad did everything to, knowing there was a danger, to try and make it so that everything would be all right, you know? He was very conscious of how easy it was, you know, to have a fire in the house. And then too, when he refinished the room down the basement for Joe and Michael, he put up a, what was it, a phone system, wasn't it? An alarm would go off if anything, if there was any danger of fire down in the basement. Were you down there when it was finished? Yeah. We had all the parties were down there. And we had good times down there. New Year's Eve, we always went, we had our friends in, we celebrated down there. It was good. That's enough for now. Let's eat. lot of fun. Okay, go to bed. Good night, everyone. I love you.
Oh, good.
One more time. It's like that.
Say, that's enough for now.
Now say I have to go to the toilet.
It's immersed.